Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time you are tuning in. Welcome to Homesteading and Gardening in the Suburbs with Misfit Gardening. I'm Emma from Misfit Gardening, and today's episode number 9. And we are talking all about those tasks that need to get done on the homestead and in the garden for fall. Because, oh balls, fall is here, which means winter is just around the corner and there's lots to do. So find out what you can do to get your homestead and garden ready for winter right after this. Alrighty, welcome back. I cannot believe where this year has gone already. A few weeks ago, I was canning all the tomatoes that were coming out, and then the next thing I know, we've got snow on the mountains here. So I cannot believe how quickly this year's flown by. But it doesn't mean that everything has stopped on the homestead, and isn't that always the truth? There's always something that needs to be done and going down. So today I want to talk a little bit about all those things that you need to get done on your homestead and in the garden to be able to get, yourself prepared and ready for winter. Now, for many people who are tuning in, I know that you come from the UK, like I do originally, and there's lots of stuff that you guys can definitely still be sowing in the garden, and we're going to talk a little bit about that first. October is about the right time of year to be sowing broad beans, or fava beans if you're here in the US, and cauliflower. So typically you would sow cauliflower now for an early crop the following year, and you would typically do that in a cold frame or in a greenhouse. You've got plenty of varieties of broad beans that will actually overwinter and can be planted directly outside in a mild area. And of course, there's lots and lots of winter salads that are available that you can be either sowing under glass in the greenhouse or sowing directly outside and covering with a little bit of frost cover. Now, if you are in the US, have no fear. There are also lots of things that you can be sowing here as well. So there's plenty of plants that are ready typically in 20 to 30 days in optimum growing conditions. So, that's usually in late spring, early summer, kind of optimal growing conditions. But, plants that are ready in 20 to 30 days include things like cut and come again salad greens. So they're things like mesclun greens or red sail lettuce or braising greens. You've also got radishes like cherry bell, French breakfast, sparkler. You have lots of oriental or Asian greens like giant red mustard or mitsuna, arugula, that's rocket to us Brits, and flamingo pink Swiss chard and pea shoots. So all of those things you can definitely be growing in your garden bed if you're using like a season extension or frost protection cover or tunnel. I've got a greenhouse, so those are the sorts of things that are going in my greenhouse, and those are definitely plants that I have in my cold frame. Now, plants that are ready in 30 to 40 days, which are, there's a little bit more variety to choose from. Obviously, you've got everything that I just talked about, but you also have mountain spinach. You've got different colours of Swiss chard that are then able. So the yellows, bright lights, 5 colours, or a cardinal. Salad greens like Jericho romaine lettuce. Spinach, one of my absolute favourites, is Bloomsdale, and that's ready in that time frame. You've got China rose radishes, which are very pretty. Beetroot, bull's blood, is definitely a quick cropper. And more oriental or Asian greens like pak choi and tender green mustards. Kales, you've got some kales like white Russian, and some turnips that come available for you to grow. Now, 40 to 50 days, again, we're talking, typical springtime weather here, but doesn't mean that you can't grow it during winter. You have early wonder tall beets, and a lot more lettuces. So things like royal oak leaf, little gem, black seeded Simpson, red deer tongue, Lola rosa. Some more turnips like top white globe or golden globe are also able to be grown. And if you're pretty you know extravagant in the kitchen, you could try something like endive. They're also pretty easy to grow and do quite well over the winter period as well. And you can get started on some greens for next year, like collards. Now, lots of other veggies, I mean, particularly if you were sowing these in late summer, you would be able to probably get in a quick crop of summer squashes, because some of those are ready, in sort of 50-55 days or so, if you've got the right growing conditions. But towards this time of year, you're getting less daylight, the hours are going down. We're starting to get into those Persephone days. And you need to have your plants in and established really before the real brunt of winter hits. And that's because during the winter months you're not really growing vegetables at this time. You're more so actually just kind of harvesting what's in there. Now, a lot of the big box stores and nurseries, they're trying to get rid of the stock that they have. So you'll often find like lots of good deals on kind of plant starts or seedling packs and things. And I love picking those things up. In fact, I kind of can't go into a nursery or actually a craft store these days. I kind of need the horse blinkers on, because I love getting me a good bargain, especially when it comes to plants. And getting those seed starter trays are a really great way for you to, get a jump on your fall garden, to be honest, especially if you've left it a little bit late. So I managed to get a few things into my garden beds in the greenhouse and in the cold frame a few weeks ago. So I've got some turnips in there, I've got winter salads, I've got some kale. Got some onion sets in there. It's a really good time to get those in. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And I also made sure to get some carrots in. Carrots have kind of been a bit of a problem child, I guess, for me to grow. I've not really managed to kind of suss out what carrots are growing best for me yet. I've been trying lots of different heirloom varieties, and I think I found one that's grown really well. However, I did not write down the variety that I planted. I didn't take my planner out with me in the garden. Normally, when I'm sowing the seeds, I will jot it down right in the planner what that variety was so I don't forget. This time I thought, I'll remember. I've only got a couple of carrots that packets that I'm sowing, and of course I got distracted by something and then promptly forgot. So I will have to go back when I'm harvesting them and try and take a look at the pictures on the seed packet and try and figure out what that was. So top tip: to make sure that you are labeling those seed containers that you are sowing, so you remember what it is that's coming up, and you can kind of start to keep track on how long those plants are taking to grow at and come to maturity. And I know that sounds a little bit crazy and a little bit too far-fetched, but honestly, the key to a good homestead, especially when you're living in the suburbs and working a 40 plus hour week, is to get things organized and planned out, because then you know exactly when things are going to be ready, when harvests are coming in, and you can kind of plan for those things. So that's all about what we can still be sowing at this time of year. Let's take a little sidestep and go through kind of some typical fall tasks that need to be done in the garden. And First up for me is always, always, always going to be get your composting started if you haven't done it already. If you are already composting, kudos to you, but now's a really good time for you to actually turn everything over and get it all mixed up. If you have compost that is ready to use, fall is a fantastic time for you to be working that into your vegetable beds and to allow things to get established ready for next season. I grow predominantly in raised beds because I have very sandy soil and things wash away really readily. So I do a lot of my soil amendments in spring. But in actual fact, this year, because I've got the raised beds now, they're in place, everything all needs topping up. And now is a good time for me to be able to do that. So I'm going to be taking apart my compost bins, pulling out all the compost that's ready and topping up those beds. And if you've got compost that's ready and you've got clay soil, now's a great time to actually work that in, as long as that you're not already in the very heavy rains that typically a lot of people have during fall. If it's very rainy where you are, you might just want to look at spreading that compost on top. So soil amendment and getting your garden beds prepped is an easy task that you can do. And it really goes in with that full tidy up. So you want to be pulling out all of those old summer plants that you have growing. So things like your tomatoes, peppers. If you've got some squash plants that have died back, you want to be pulling those out. And those can all get added into your new compost pile. However, if you have a problem with powdery mildew, like I've unfortunately had on lots of my plants this year, those can't go into your compost bin. You need to either put those in your regular municipal trash and waste, or burn them if you live in an area where that is permitted. So you're obviously going to be going through and pulling out all of those old plants and kind of doing a bit of a tidy up. Lots of people like to do soil amendment at this time. It works really great if you've got heavy clay soils. Lots of people will dig all that over with a fork because as the frost starts to come, it will help to break apart that heavy clay structure. It's a good opportunity to work in some horse manure, especially if it's got a lot of straw in it. That will help improve the soil that you have there no end. And certainly where I used to live in the UK and the allotment that I had there, it was very heavy clay soil, and every winter I would work in a lot of that straw, horse manure, and over the course of a few years that soil improved massively and I started to get really good quality veggies coming out of there. As you're clearing up those garden beds, it's a really good time of year to actually be collecting seeds from plants that you want to keep. So whether they're things like your sunflowers that are finally done, or if it's something like beans that you've been growing, now's a really good time to be doing that because naturally that's when seeds are typically mature and ripe for taking. And there's lots and lots of guides online that are available on explaining on how to pull harvest those seeds basically. You want to make sure that you're storing them somewhere that is free from moisture and preferably in the dark and somewhere that's cool, to help maintain those seeds. And it's a really good time of year to actually take stock of the seeds that you do have in your mini seed bank that you've probably got stashed away in the house, and really figure out what do you need to buy, what do you have enough of. Is there anybody that you know who also grows their own foods that you can maybe swap with? I bought all the seeds that I plan to grow for the next 3 years already. I'm not allowed to buy anymore because, as I was explaining, with going into a nursery and buying all the seed starts, I have a similar problem with buying actual seeds. I've got loads, absolutely loads of seeds. And I'm trying to live a bit more sustainably with my seeds, and I'm starting to do a lot more harvesting and seed saving from the plants that have grown really well in the garden. And this year's been, very bad for powdery mildew, for example. And a lot of the squashes that I managed to grow and that grew well, I'm going to be saving the seed from those because they obviously were able to produce really well, even with heavy powdery mildew. So they've got some resistance there that I want to preserve and continue to grow. So, seed saving is another great task to be doing this fall. Another one is to get your tools cleaned up and try and organize stuff. So, now we're getting into that time of year where good weather is few and far between. And if you have a nice weather on a weekend or a day when you're not working or you've got some free time, it's a good opportunity to get into your shed or into your greenhouse and check over your tools, make sure everything is free from rust, give it a good clean up, give it a sharpen. Things like your lawnmower blades and stuff all need sharpening, and get them ready to store for winter. There's some basic lawnmower maintenance which people tend to do in fall before, like, or right after the last cut that they do on the lawn before the lawnmower gets stored away for the rest of the winter. For me, I like to check that my rakes are working and that they're not falling apart, because fall obviously means that the leaves are all going to be coming down. I like to rake up my leaves and stuff because I like that kind of sense of satisfaction that you see when you've raked everything up and you have a giant pile of leaves. And then, I always like to kind of jump in the leaves. I know I'm 32 and I still like to do that. But the other great thing for me is, it's exercise. I'm not sat at my desk at work doing something. And, after I've raked up all the leaves, I feel like I've really, earned myself a decent beer to enjoy. So I like to use the rakes. It's also really good for the grass on the lawn when you're raking everything up, because you're getting up all the thatch that's in there as well. So it'll help improve the health of your lawn, which is why I much prefer a rake over a leaf blower. Now, if you have mild weather, um, it is a good idea to plant some strawberries as well to get them established over the winter, and then they will be in a better situation for you to be harvesting fruit from them next year. And strawberries is one of those things that a lot of people forget that you can actually be planting in fall. You can also plant lots of your spring bulbs like tulips and daffodils in fall, ready for the next spring, so you can have a wonderful splash of colour. In the vegetable garden, if you're not sowing seeds under glass or for some quick crops to get through, if you're wanting something that's going to sit in the ground over winter and then grow on into spring, October is a perfect time, especially if you're living in the northern states in the US, to be planting your onion sets. So that's the little bulb onions that you can pick up, and also your garlic. And for me, like, my favorite varieties of garlic to grow are Music and Bogatia, because I live in sort of the northern parts of Utah. It is a hardneck variety of garlic that I grow, and I like my garlic to be pretty pungent. So this is the right time of year to be getting that in. You don't want to be planting it anywhere where you have those types of plants already where they've grown this year. So anything from the onion family, you don't want to put it in the same place. You want to kind of mix it up a bit and rotate your crops, and that's going to help you have a healthier garden next year. Now, There's a lot going on in the garden and we're still not done yet. For extra credit, if you really want to get ahead of the game, especially with, those of you that are in super short growing seasons and really long winters, now's a really good time for you to sort out all of your seed starting materials ready for spring and get everything cleaned up and disinfected with a mild bleach solution, really so you can kind of put everything, to bed for winter, or get it all cleaned up so you can bring it in the house if you're having to start plants indoors. I know I've got a couple of friends in Canada, and one of them's in zone 3, 2 or 3 growing area, and he starts a lot of his summer crops indoors in his garage in a like a little greenhouse kind of dealy with lots of shelving in there and lights, like nursery lights and stuff. So getting those all prepared in fall, and they're super easy to clean, especially if you've got a soft brush, like one of those broom brushes and things. You can really get all the dirt and stuff out of there, and it's really important for you to get them cleaned and sanitized as well, because that's going to help give your seedlings the real best start that they're gonna really excel at growing, especially when they don't have to contend with pests or disease, mold, mildews, those kind of things that might be present on those containers, and reusing them. For lots of people, fall is a good opportunity to get some fruit trees into their backyard garden and homestead. And this is a fantastic time of year to be ordering bare root trees. I love having lots of fruit trees in the garden, and I am definitely always on the lookout for great bargains. And if you have a small garden, I would definitely recommend getting a multi-grafted variety. So that there are typically fruit trees that have different varieties that are on one plant. So, for example, with an apple tree, you might have 3 or 4 different varieties of apples that are all going to grow on one tree. You can also get they're called fruit salad trees here, where you can get a peach and a nectarine and a plum all growing together on the same tree, which is really great, especially if you live in a small space and you want to be able to grow more fruit. I've got lots of multi-grafted trees in my orchard, and we've had a good harvest from all of them. So fall's definitely a good time to be checking out those. It's also a good time for you to divide rhubarb crowns. So if you've got well-established rhubarb plants, now's a great time to divide them up with a shovel and get them replanted straight away. And anything that's kind of decayed or looking, a little bit manky, you want to, discard those things and only want to plant what looks healthy. Fruit, other fruit plants that you can be planting at this time include berry bushes, and you can actually increase the number of plants that you've got at this time by taking hardwood cuttings from plants like gooseberries, blueberries, black currants, red currants. And you just take some cuttings of those, put them in some gritty soil, and keep them somewhere kind of sheltered, but keep them moist over winter. And then come spring, those should all be putting up some new growth, and you've got some new plants for free, which is pretty awesome, right? I always like getting free plants, and if I can propagate from what I already have, even more better, right? So over to the homestead. Now is the perfect time for you to be doing a deep clean of your coop. So whether you have chickens or ducks or quail, now is a really good time to get in there, get in all those nooks and crannies, and get things thoroughly cleaned out and disinfected and sanitized, ready for the winter. I know a lot of people who don't keep chickens over winter because there's a lot of work that you have to be doing to maintain the water, keeping that from freezing and all that good stuff. but it's not impossible. We've definitely kept chickens over winter, and it's been a little bit of work. Where we've had to bring in the water on a night, and then bring it out in the morning, and then kind of switch it when we've gotten home from work and stuff. It is also the perfect time after you've cleaned out your coop to insulate. Let's make sure that your girls have plenty of insulation, that they've got some deep litter bedding to help keep everything warm, and that you've got things sorted to help block the drafts, because it is the drafts that are typically the killer when it comes to chickens, and nobody wants to find chickens that have passed away from hypothermia. So insulate. Make sure that you're doing your due diligence, and that you're checking for cracks or soft spots, wood rot, all that kind of stuff. If you've got a good day, make sure that you're making those repairs to your coop to help it last through the winter. Same thing if you've got rabbits, you want to be doing all that maintenance and stuff before the snow comes, and making sure that your hutches are ready to go. And, again, make sure that everything's insulated, and that you've got a plan in place to make sure that they've got, access to water, and that they're going to be kept nice and warm and toasty. This is also a really good time of year for you to, take stock of what's worked really well in your garden and your homestead, and what hasn't. And, maybe start planning some areas where, if you're wanting to put new garden beds in, or maybe you're wanting to put an orchard in, or, if you're thinking about, raising chickens, I know a lot of places you can get baby chicks in winter, and then usually by the time spring rolls around, they're about the right age to be laying. So this is a great time to really sort of, take stock of what's worked and what hasn't, and what could you do differently, or what would you like to try next year. So some of the things that I'm going to be trying next year, or really this year, is I'm going to be taking my chili plants, and I'm going to try overwintering them in the greenhouse, and then seeing if I can plant them out in spring, and whether I will get a better harvest. So I've had a terrible harvest of peppers this year. They've actually only just started producing peppers now, and the season's kind of coming to the end with the snow getting here. So that was kind of disappointing, and that's something that I'd like to try differently. Also, chickens. We're actually going to be discussing whether we're even going to be doing chickens next year or not, and whether they're really, worth the benefit. I mean, the eggs and stuff is great, the meat's great, but I'm not sure, whether it's something that we're going to want to continue to do. We've certainly not had anywhere near as many eggs as what we would have liked to have gotten. So there's some things that we're thinking about here in our homestead, but I'd like to know what you guys are thinking about, and what you're getting ready to do on your homestead and in your garden this fall. So come on over to our Facebook group, or drop over and say hi on Facebook on the Misfit Gardening page, or send me an email. Just come on over and say hi. We want to know what you guys are doing. Until next time, I hope that your garden grows beautifully, and that your homestead is ticking over and getting ready for winter. Have a wonderful week. Bye bye. This podcast uses the song Exhilarate by Kevin MacLeod from Incompetech.com, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0 license. The song is used for both the beginning and ending credits.